Have you ever felt like people didn't understand you? Maybe they looked at you and thought they knew who you were, what you could do, or what you were capable of. But in reality, they didn't know anything. They didn't know the real you. It's kind of like they see one side of the story and assume that's the whole picture. They judge you by what's on the outside, but they don't know the truth. Imagine being one of those people who are always overlooked. Imagine walking through the world, just trying to do your thing, but it's like you're invisible to everyone around you. People might smile at you, but they don't really see you. And then one day, when you least expect it, you become the person everyone notices. The one they should have been scared of all along. The quietest person in the room turns out to be the one you should have paid attention to. Before we dive into this amazing story, take a second and tell me where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below. I promise you'll want to stick around for the crazy twists ahead. Trust me, this is a story you don't want to miss. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it. It was just another normal day for Emily Dawson. Or at least, that's what people thought. It seemed like any other day for her, the kind of day where no one would look twice. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and people were hustling and bustling on the busy streets. For most people, everything seemed just fine. But for Emily, today was a little different. You see, Emily wasn't the type of person who stood out. She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. In fact, if you walked by her on the street, you might not even notice her. She was one of those people who blended in, just quietly going about her business. And that was fine with Emily. She didn't need attention. She didn't need to be in the spotlight. But there was one thing about Emily that made her different from everyone else: she was blind. She couldn't see the world the way most people could. But she didn't let that stop her. No, Emily had figured out a way to live in a world that wasn't built for her. She moved through the streets with her cane, the soft tap of it against the ground guiding her. Each step was carefully placed, and each sound was familiar to her. She knew the streets, the sidewalks, the corners. She knew where she was going, even if no one else could see that. But there was something more about Emily that no one could see. Something that no one knew about. It was a secret she'd kept for years, a secret that would soon shake everything up. People looked at her and only saw the blind woman with the cane and her guide dog, Titan. Titan was a big golden retriever, always by her side. His job was to help Emily, to guide her through the world. He was her eyes, her loyal companion. But what no one knew was that Titan wasn't just any guide dog. No, Titan was special. He wasn't just a regular dog. Titan had served in the military. He was a retired Navy SEAL K9. And when I say he was trained for everything, I mean everything. From protecting his handler to tracking dangerous criminals, Titan had done it all. He was a highly trained dog with skills that could put most humans to shame. But Emily didn't tell anyone this. She didn't feel the need to. She liked keeping that part of her life private. She knew that if anyone found out the truth, it would change everything. People would treat her differently, and she didn't want that. She wanted to live her life quietly, just like everyone else. And so, she did. Every day, Emily would walk the streets with Titan by her side, going to work, running errands, living a life that seemed simple on the outside. But on the inside, there was something brewing. There was something waiting to come to the surface. Today, Emily had no idea that it would all come crashing down, but she was about to face something that would change everything. It started out like any other day. Emily was walking down the sidewalk with Titan, making her way to the cafe where she worked. The world around her was busy, and people were moving quickly. She could hear the sounds of footsteps, the chatter of voices, the honking of horns, and the distant hum of traffic. But one sound stood out more than the others. It was the roar of motorcycle engines, the deep, powerful sound of the bikes getting closer. As she walked, she could hear them. A group of bikers were coming up behind her. Their bikes rumbled loudly, shaking the air with their power. Emily didn't mind the noise. She was used to it. She had learned to block out the loud sounds around her, focusing only on what she needed to hear. Titan was always close, keeping her safe, guiding her along the path. But this time, something was different. As the bikers got closer, Emily could feel the change in the air. There was an unease in the way people were looking at the bikers. She could hear their voices now, loud and rude. They weren't just passing by. No, these bikers seemed to be looking for trouble. One of them, a big guy with a rough voice, suddenly shouted out, "Hey, watch where you're going." Emily hadn't even realized he was talking to her at first. She didn't react right away. She couldn't see who was yelling or what was happening around her. But she could feel the anger in his voice. He was close now, and his words were meant to hurt. Titan let out a low growl beside her, and Emily gently patted his head. He wasn't scared. He wasn't going to let anyone get too close. But the bikers didn't seem to care. They started laughing, making fun of her. They thought it was funny that she couldn't see them, that she didn't know who they were or what they were doing. Emily had dealt with rude people before. She had been treated unfairly countless times in her life because of her blindness. People thought she was weak, that she couldn't defend herself. They didn't know anything about her. They didn't know who she was or what she was capable of. But today, something inside Emily was different. She wasn't going to let these bikers push her around. She wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. She was tired of being overlooked. She was tired of being treated like she didn't matter. And as the bikers continued to make fun of her, something deep inside Emily began to stir. Today, the quiet woman with the cane and the guide dog was about to show the world just how much strength she had. And it would start with the bikers who thought they could get away with bullying her. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that Emily was more than just a woman with a cane. She was more than just a blind woman walking down the street. Emily Dawson was someone no one should have underestimated. Today, the world was about to find out just how wrong they were. And so, the stage was set. What started as a quiet walk down the street was about to turn into a story of strength, courage, and the power of never judging a book by its cover. Stay tuned. You won't believe what happens next. Emily had always been used to people overlooking her. The sound of her white cane tapping against the sidewalk as she walked with Titan was something she had learned to live with. It was a way for her to know where she was going, but it was also a signal to the world that she was different. People looked at her with pity or curiosity, but mostly, they just ignored her. It didn't matter that Emily was smart or that she had done many things in her life that people thought would be impossible for someone who couldn't see. People looked at her and saw only a blind woman, walking with her guide dog. They never saw the strength or courage inside her. They never saw the years of training Titan had gone through, or the incredible bond they shared. But that was okay. Emily didn't need their attention or their approval. She had Titan, and that was all she really needed. But as Emily made her way through the crowded city square today, something felt different. There was a strange energy in the air. Maybe it was because the weather had turned warmer, and people were in a better mood. Or maybe it was because the cafe up ahead had just opened its outdoor seating for the day. But there was something else. Something that made Emily's senses tingle. She couldn't see the bikers who were sitting near the entrance to the cafe, but she could hear them. The rumble of their motorcycle engines filled the air. It was a sound that made people step aside and move quickly out of their way. Bikers like these weren't known for being friendly or polite. They looked tough, like they could intimidate anyone with just a glare. As she got closer, she could hear them talking loudly, laughing, and joking with each other. Their words weren't kind, and their voices were full of mockery. They looked like the kind of people who didn't care about anyone but themselves. The group was rowdy, laughing at jokes that Emily couldn't quite make out, but she could tell from the tone of their voices that they weren't good jokes. They were the kind of jokes that made people feel small. Emily wasn't afraid. She had lived through many challenges before, but today, it was different. As she moved closer to the entrance of the cafe, one of the bikers turned his head and caught sight of her. He stared at her for a moment before giving her a rude, impatient look. "Watch where you're going, lady," he called out, his voice sharp and harsh. Emily felt the breath catch in her throat. She didn't like the way he spoke to her, but she didn't react right away. She had learned to ignore the hurtful words of strangers. She knew she couldn't let them get to her. Titan, always by her side, gave a gentle tug on the leash, as if sensing her discomfort. He was calm, but his posture had changed. He was alert now, his muscles tensed, ready to protect her. Before Emily could take another step, the man deliberately bumped into her. It wasn't an accident. He did it on purpose, trying to push her off balance. Emily felt her body shift as she lost her footing for a moment, but Titan was right there, steadying her. His warm body pressed against her side, and she felt the solid comfort of his presence. The biker didn't seem to care that she was struggling to keep her balance. Instead, he just sneered and muttered, "What? You can't even see me, can you? Probably doesn't matter, huh?" His voice was filled with sarcasm and mockery. The other bikers laughed. Emily stayed calm, taking a deep breath and using her cane to adjust her position. She didn't say anything at first, just continued walking forward. Her head was held high, and she walked as confidently as she could, not letting the rude comments break her stride. But inside, things were different. A storm was building in her mind. She didn't like being treated this way. She didn't like the way people looked down on her, assuming that because she couldn't see, she was weak or defenseless. But Emily wasn't weak. She wasn't helpless. She had her guide dog, Titan, and more importantly, she had the strength to stand up for herself when it mattered. She had been through so much in her life, and each time someone treated her badly, it just made her stronger. Emily had faced challenges that most people couldn't even imagine, but no one knew that about her. No one knew what it was like to rely on only her senses, to trust Titan to help her navigate a world that wasn't made for people like her. But that didn't mean she didn't get tired of it. Sometimes, it was exhausting to always be the person that no one took seriously. It was tiring to have to prove over and over again that she was just as capable as anyone else. As the bikers continued to laugh, Emily felt her patience wearing thin. She could hear their words, and she could feel the anger in their voices. They thought they could get away with this, making fun of her, treating her like she didn't matter. But what they didn't know was that they were pushing her to a point where something inside her was about to snap. It wasn't just that she was tired of being overlooked. It wasn't just that she hated the way they were treating her. It was the fact that they didn't even know who they were messing with. Emily was far more than just a blind woman with a guide dog. She was far more than just someone to pity or look down on. She had fought too hard to get to where she was, and she wasn't going to let anyone, especially a group of rude bikers, take away her dignity. Titan's body was still close to hers, but she could feel his muscles tense, ready for whatever might come next. Emily gave him a quiet, reassuring command, knowing that he would do whatever it took to protect her. She knew he wasn't just a dog. He was her partner, her protector. He had been trained for this kind of situation before. He knew how to handle people who tried to hurt or intimidate his handler. But Emily wasn't just going to rely on Titan to take care of things. She wasn't going to let the bikers push her around anymore. They didn't know her, and they didn't know what she was capable of. As she continued to walk, she could feel the eyes of the bikers on her, watching her every move. She could hear their sneers, their words of mockery, but she wasn't going to let it break her. She wasn't going to let them win. Inside, Emily made a decision. Today was going to be different. Today, she was going to show them that she was more than just a blind woman. She was going to show them that they had made a huge mistake in thinking she was weak. She took another step, the tension between her and the bikers growing with every second. The air was thick with unspoken words, and Emily could feel the storm in her mind growing stronger. The bikers hadn't seen anything yet. As she stepped closer to the cafe, she felt the weight of their stares on her, but she didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She wasn't scared of them. She wasn't going to let anyone treat her like she didn't matter. And little did the bikers know, they were about to find out exactly what it meant to mess with someone like Emily Dawson. The insults didn't stop. The group of bikers thought they were having fun at Emily's expense, and they seemed to believe they could say whatever they wanted without any consequences. They didn't know who she really was. And they certainly didn't know who Titan was. Titan wasn't just any guide dog. He wasn't just a furry companion to help Emily find her way around the world. Titan had a past that nobody could even begin to imagine. A past that had shaped him into something much more than just a dog. He had served in the Navy, not as a regular soldier, but as a highly trained canine hero. His job had been to assist in dangerous situations, to protect those who were at risk, and to take down threats that no human could handle. He had been through more than most people could imagine, and his skills, his senses, his speed, his ability to sense danger were beyond anything the bikers could possibly understand. They were poking fun at a retired Navy hero, and they had no idea. Emily knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't flinch. She didn't shout or yell back at them. No. Emily knew that staying calm was the most powerful weapon she had. She was a master at observing, at noticing the small details that others overlooked. She wasn't going to let her emotions take over. Instead, she silently took note of every biker, every one of their movements, and every detail about their behavior. She watched how they swaggered around the square, like they owned the entire place. How they laughed at each other's crude jokes. They thought they were invincible. They thought that they could walk all over anyone they pleased. But Emily was learning about them, one small detail at a time. And with every observation, she grew more and more certain that they didn't know who they were dealing with. Titan, standing loyally by her side, didn't make a sound. He knew that Emily wasn't asking for trouble, but if things were to escalate, he was ready. They had trained together for years, and Titan knew exactly how to handle situations like this. He had been trained to protect her in ways that most people wouldn't believe possible. Even in the face of danger, Titan was calm, confident, and always alert. Roxy, one of the bikers, noticed how Emily was handling the situation. She could see that Emily wasn't intimidated. Instead of backing down, Emily walked on with the same steady pace. Roxy wasn't used to people ignoring her, especially not people who seemed vulnerable, like Emily. She took it as a challenge. She couldn't stand it when someone didn't react to her taunts the way she expected. So she decided to push a little harder. "Hey, lady, you don't speak much, huh?" Roxy shouted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I bet you didn't even hear the joke Jax just made." Jax, one of the bikers who had made fun of Emily earlier, smirked as if he expected Emily to cower. He and Roxy shared a laugh. But Emily didn't flinch. Instead, she turned her head slightly toward Roxy. She didn't say much, but there was something in her expression that made Roxy stop for a second. Emily's mouth tightened, and she muttered under her breath, "I hear more than you think." Her voice was calm, controlled, but there was something about the way she spoke that caught Roxy off guard. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something else. Something that made Roxy hesitate, even if just for a moment. For a split second, Roxy felt a chill run down her spine. "Yeah, sure you do," Roxy said with a laugh, but this time it wasn't as loud. She took a step back, just a little, as if she was unsure. Something in Emily's voice had made her pause. But she quickly shook it off and turned away. Emily could feel the tension in the air. She knew that things were building, and she wasn't going to let it end here. Every word, every laugh, every moment of disrespect was adding to a storm that was quietly brewing inside her. She didn't need to shout or make a scene. She didn't need to prove anything with anger. Emily knew that her silence was more powerful than anything they could say to her. She was stronger than they realized. She had been dealing with people who didn't understand her for years. She had faced countless challenges, each one making her more resilient. But there was one thing the bikers didn't know. They didn't know what Emily had behind her. They didn't know what Titan was capable of. They didn't know that Titan, with his years of training, was capable of taking on more than just simple obstacles. They didn't know that Titan had served in some of the toughest situations in the Navy, working alongside Navy SEALs, handling explosives, and taking on threats that most people couldn't even imagine. They didn't know that Titan had once been a war hero, and that he had learned to protect his handler, Emily, with every fiber of his being. The bikers thought they could pick on Emily because they didn't realize who was walking beside her. They didn't know that Titan wasn't just a guide dog. He was a trained protector, a hero in his own right. Every time they disrespected Emily, they were pushing her closer to the edge. But more than that, they were pushing Titan to the edge as well. Emily could sense the change in Titan's posture. He was still calm, but she could feel that he was ready. If the bikers pushed things too far, Titan would react. And when Titan reacted, it would be fast. It would be fierce. And it would be something the bikers would never forget. Emily took a deep breath, her mind focused. She wasn't going to let her emotions control her. She wasn't going to let the bikers see her lose her cool. Instead, she kept walking, step by step, toward the center of the square. Her cane tapped the ground in front of her, guiding her, but her mind was on the bikers. Every movement, every word, every sneer, they were all etched into her memory. She could tell that the bikers were starting to grow bored. They had made their jokes. They had mocked her, tried to get a rise out of her, but she hadn't reacted. She wasn't playing their game. And that made them uneasy. People like the bikers didn't like it when their targets didn't behave the way they expected. Jax, who had been the most vocal, looked at Emily for a moment. He tried to catch her eye, maybe hoping for some sort of reaction, but Emily didn't look his way. She kept her head held high and kept walking. But inside, Emily was ready. Ready for whatever might happen next. Titan, too, was ready. He had never been more alert in his life. He could feel the tension in the air, and he knew that something was coming. He knew that Emily had had enough. And when the time came, when the bikers pushed too far, they would find out just how wrong they were to underestimate her and just how dangerous it was to mess with someone who had a partner like Titan. The storm was about to break, and nothing was going to stop it. The air in the city square was thick with tension. What had started as a light-hearted attempt by the bikers to have a bit of fun at Emily's expense had now turned into something more. It had gone from mockery to disrespect. But what the bikers didn't know was that every word, every laugh, and every moment of taunting had pushed Emily closer to the edge. And when Jax, big, tough, and arrogant Jax, decided to take things even further, that was when the storm finally broke. Jax was done playing games. He was tired of the way Emily was ignoring him, tired of the way she was staying calm while his friends laughed. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. The fact that Emily wasn't responding to his insults just made him want to show her who was in charge. With a loud snort, Jax took a few quick strides toward Emily. He had had enough of her quietness, enough of her calm composure. The bikers stepped back a little, sensing the change in the air. Even they could see that things were about to get serious. "You're really starting to annoy me, lady," Jax said, his voice low but threatening. A smile tugged at the corners of his lips, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of grin someone gets when they know they have power over another person. He cracked his knuckles loudly, the sound echoing through the square. "Maybe you need to learn a lesson about respecting people who actually matter." Emily didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She didn't raise her voice or yell. Instead, she stood tall, her cane tapping gently on the ground, a calm presence in the middle of Jax's storm of insults. Her heart was steady, her mind clear. Titan, her guide dog, stood beside her, unwavering. His golden fur was shining in the sunlight, and his eyes were locked on Jax, watching every movement, every shift in Jax's posture. Titan could feel the tension in the air, and he was ready. Emily took a deep breath, and with one firm tug on Titan's leash, she sent a signal. Titan, who had been standing perfectly still up until now, moved into action. His muscles rippled under his fur as he stood tall, like a lion ready to defend its pride. He let out a low, guttural growl that sent a chill down the spine of anyone who heard it. It wasn't the playful bark of a typical dog. This was the sound of a creature that had seen and done things most people could never imagine. Jax's eyes widened for a split second, and for the first time, he hesitated. But it was too late. Titan wasn't going to wait around. In one swift, smooth motion, Titan surged forward, his powerful frame moving faster than anyone could have predicted. Jax tried to step back, but Titan was already there, his nose inches from Jax's arm. With incredible precision, Titan grabbed Jax's arm in his mouth. It wasn't a vicious bite, but a firm, controlled hold that pinned Jax's arm to his side. The grip was strong, unyielding. Jax tried to pull away, but Titan's muscles were rock solid, and he wasn't letting go. The rest of the bikers froze in place, their laughter dying in their throats. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Jax, who had been so confident just moments ago, was now being held in place by a dog. But this wasn't just any dog. This was Titan, the retired Navy SEAL K9. Titan didn't move an inch, and neither did Emily. She remained calm, standing tall with a quiet authority that made her presence undeniable. The bikers were all looking at each other, unsure of what to do. This wasn't a fight they were prepared for. They had never seen anything like it before. Jax's cocky grin faltered, and for the first time, he looked nervous. His face turned pale as he realized who was really in charge here. It wasn't him. It wasn't his loud friends. It wasn't their tough guy attitudes. No. It was Titan. A highly trained, highly skilled, and highly loyal Navy SEAL K9 who had spent years protecting his handler and who was now standing between Emily and any threat. Emily took another deep breath, and then, with calm confidence, she spoke. Her voice was steady, clear, and filled with authority that cut through the tense silence. "I think you've messed with the wrong person," she said, her words piercing the air like a sharp arrow. There was no anger in her voice. There was no fear. Just pure, unshakable confidence. Jax didn't know what to say. The tough guy who had been so eager to make fun of Emily was now speechless. He couldn't break free from Titan's grip, and he couldn't hide his panic. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated Titan. And now, there was no going back. The other bikers were starting to understand what was happening. They had thought it was a joke at first. They thought they were just dealing with a blind woman and her dog. But they were wrong. They hadn't seen what was standing right in front of them. Titan wasn't just a dog. He wasn't just a loyal guide dog. He was a trained Navy SEAL, a weapon in his own right. The bikers had no idea the kind of training and skill he had. They didn't understand that when Emily had a dog like Titan by her side, she was never alone. They didn't know that Titan had been through some of the most dangerous situations imaginable, and that nothing scared him. Not even a group of tough bikers. Emily wasn't just a quiet, blind woman. She wasn't someone to be mocked or ignored. She was strong, capable, and surrounded by a force that no one had seen coming. Her calm demeanor, her silent strength, and her partnership with Titan were the things that made her unstoppable. The bikers were silent now, their bravado gone. They looked at Emily and Titan, and they realized that they had crossed a line they shouldn't have. Jax's arm was still pinned, and he was slowly starting to realize that there was no way out of this. Titan wasn't going to let him go until Emily said so. Emily took a step forward, her cane tapping lightly against the ground. She looked at Jax, and then at the other bikers. You thought you could bully me. You thought you could get away with disrespecting me. She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. But I'm not the one you should be worried about. The bikers glanced at each other, their faces showing a mixture of fear and regret. They had messed with the wrong person. And they knew it now. Emily turned to Titan, giving him a soft command. Titan released his grip on Jax's arm and stepped back, allowing Jax to straighten up, though the biker was clearly shaken. Jax didn't try to fight back or argue. He didn't have the courage to do anything anymore. His tough guy act was over. The silence in the square was deafening. No one spoke. The bikers were slowly backing away, and Emily stood tall, her head high and proud. In that moment, Emily didn't need to say anything more. Her message had been clear. She wasn't someone to be messed with. And neither was Titan. The bikers had learned a valuable lesson that day: don't judge someone by their appearance, and never, ever underestimate the power of a loyal friend, especially one who had been trained to protect with everything he had. The sound of sirens grew louder, echoing through the city square. Within moments, the police arrived, their red and blue lights flashing brightly in the midday sun. The bikers, once so full of confidence and bravado, now looked small and scared. Jax and his crew tried to protest, but no one was listening to them anymore. The crowd, which had once been entertained by their rude jokes and insults, was now filled with a sense of disbelief. The police didn't waste any time. They quickly surrounded Jax and his friends. With swift, practiced motions, the officers cuffed the bikers, their hands pulled behind their backs. Jax, still shaken, glared at Emily and Titan, but there was nothing he could do now. The tough exterior he had once carried was gone, replaced by a look of fear and uncertainty. His tough guy attitude had disappeared the moment Titan had stepped in, and now there was nothing left but the consequences of his actions. "You're under arrest for harassment and disturbing the peace," one of the officers said, his voice calm and firm. The bikers tried to argue, but the evidence of their wrongdoings was clear to everyone. The crowd had seen everything. The bikers had mocked and insulted a woman they thought was easy to push around. They never expected that the quiet, blind woman and her guide dog would be the ones to put them in their place. The officers didn't listen to the bikers' complaints. They knew they had crossed a line. Jax and his crew were escorted away, their faces now pale and filled with fear. They had been so sure of themselves only moments ago. Now, they were just a group of criminals being taken into custody. The reality of their actions had finally hit them, and it was too late to turn back. As the bikers were taken away, Emily didn't say a word. She stood tall, her posture proud and calm, as she always did. Titan, her loyal golden retriever, sat by her side. His eyes were focused, scanning the crowd as he always did, ever watchful, ever ready. The sunlight made his golden coat shine like a beacon, and his presence was a symbol of strength and loyalty. Emily reached down and gently patted his head, her fingers brushing through his soft fur. The crowd that had gathered to watch the commotion had gone from laughing at the bikers' antics to stunned silence. People stood in awe, looking at Emily and Titan with new respect. They had witnessed the bikers' cruelty, and they had seen how Emily had handled it. With quiet dignity, without raising her voice or losing her cool, Emily had shown them all what true strength looked like. The crowd had underestimated her from the very beginning. They had assumed that because Emily was blind, because she had a guide dog, that she was weak or helpless. But the truth was far from that. Emily was strong, capable, and fearless. She had a partner in Titan, who wasn't just a dog but a highly trained Navy SEAL K-9. Together, they had faced the bikers with calm confidence, and in the end, it was the bikers who were left defeated. Some people in the crowd even stepped forward, approaching Emily with respect in their eyes. A few asked if they could pet Titan, but Emily smiled gently and shook her head. "He's working right now," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But thank you for your kindness." As the police officers finished taking the bikers away, the crowd slowly began to disperse. People were still talking about what had just happened, whispering among themselves. Some of them had taken out their phones and were already sharing videos of the scene. They had witnessed something incredible today. A quiet woman and her guide dog had taught a group of tough bikers a lesson they would never forget. Emily didn't need to say anything to the crowd. She didn't need their praise or their admiration. She had handled the situation exactly how she wanted to, with dignity, confidence, and the quiet strength that came from years of experience. The bikers had picked the wrong person to mess with, and now they were paying the price. As the last of the police cars pulled away, Emily began to walk again, Titan by her side. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. She knew that Titan was there to guide her, and that together, they could face anything that came their way. They didn't need to prove themselves to anyone. They had already shown the world what they were made of. And as they walked through the square, the people who had once watched with laughter now watched with respect. They had seen the power of kindness, the power of calm, and the power of standing up for yourself when no one else believed in you. Emily had faced the bikers with grace, and now, she was walking away with the respect she deserved. Later that day, Emily would receive messages of support from people all over the city. Word had spread fast about what had happened, and soon, the story of the blind woman and her Navy SEAL K-9 became a tale of inspiration for many. People began to see Emily not as a blind woman with a guide dog, but as a symbol of strength and resilience. Her actions had sent a clear message: don't judge people based on what you see on the outside. Don't assume that someone is weak just because they appear different. And never, ever underestimate the power of quiet strength. Emily smiled to herself as she read through the messages. She didn't need the praise. She knew the truth. She had never been weak, and neither was Titan. Together, they had faced the challenge, and together, they had triumphed. That was enough for her. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the city square, Emily and Titan continued their walk, side by side. The world around them was full of noise, full of people rushing by and living their busy lives. But for Emily, and for Titan, this was just another day. They had faced adversity, stood up for themselves, and walked away with their heads held high. And that was all that mattered. The city was quieter now. The bikers were gone. The crowd had dispersed. But the lessons learned would stay with everyone who had witnessed what happened that day. And for Emily and Titan, it was just another chapter in their story of strength, loyalty, and the power of never giving up. Sometimes, the quietest person in the room holds the most power. And those who judge by appearances? They're the ones who never see it coming. Emily Dawson was a quiet woman. She didn't speak much, and she moved through the world as though she was invisible. People often overlooked her, thinking that because she was blind and used a guide dog, she was weak or helpless. But, as we've seen, appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes, the people who seem the least powerful are the ones with the most strength inside them. Emily had been the target of cruelty and mockery from people who thought they could push her around. But in the end, she showed the world that no one should ever be underestimated. She proved that strength doesn't always have to shout. It can be quiet, calm, and steady. Think about it, how often do we judge someone just by the way they look? How many times have we made assumptions about people, thinking we know all there is to know about them, when the truth is, we have no idea. Sometimes, we think that because someone is quiet, they don't have anything important to say. Or maybe we think that because someone doesn't look like they're tough or important, they can't possibly do something amazing. But what we don't see is the power they hold inside, power that, in the right moment, can make all the difference. Emily had faced so much in her life. She had been ignored, disrespected, and underestimated. And yet, she kept moving forward. She didn't let the cruelty of others change who she was. She didn't let the world's judgment get to her. Emily knew that she had something powerful inside her, something the world couldn't see at first. But she didn't need the world to see it. She knew what she was capable of, and that was enough. When Jax and his biker friends tried to push her around, they thought they were in control. They thought they could bully her because they didn't understand who she really was. They didn't know the strength Emily carried inside her, and they certainly didn't know that her guide dog, Titan, was more than just a dog. Titan wasn't just a guide dog, he was a retired Navy SEAL K-9. He had been trained to protect, to fight, and to serve. And when the time came, he was ready to show the bikers what real strength looked like. The bikers were stunned when they realized they had messed with the wrong person. The calm, quiet woman they thought they could push around had a secret. She wasn't weak, she was strong. And Titan, her loyal companion, was more than just a dog. He was a hero. Together, Emily and Titan showed everyone that appearances don't tell the whole story. So, what can we learn from Emily's story? It's simple: don't judge a book by its cover. Don't assume you know someone just because of how they look, how they act, or what you think you know about them. Every person has their own story. Every person has their own struggles, their own strengths, and their own power. And sometimes, the quietest people in the room are the ones who can surprise you the most. Think about how often we make judgments based on what we see. Have you ever thought someone was weak or not capable just because of their appearance? Maybe you've seen someone who seemed shy or quiet and thought they didn't have anything important to say. Or maybe you've met someone who didn't look like they had much to offer and assumed they wouldn't be able to do something amazing. We've all been there. It's easy to judge based on what we see, but that's not always the full picture. The truth is, we never know the full story until we take the time to really listen, really pay attention, and really understand. Emily's story teaches us that we should never underestimate anyone. We don't know what someone else is going through or what they've already overcome. We don't know what strength they carry inside them. And most importantly, we don't know what someone is capable of until we see them in action. So, let's take a moment to think about the people around us. Have we ever judged someone without really getting to know them? Have we ever made assumptions about someone based on their appearance, their quietness, or their outward demeanor? If you think back, maybe you can remember a time when you judged someone too quickly. Maybe there was a time when you thought someone was weak, or shy, or unimportant, only to find out later that they were far stronger, far braver, or far more capable than you ever imagined. It's easy to judge others, especially when we don't know their full story. But the real lesson is this: everyone has a hidden strength. Everyone has something amazing about them that isn't always obvious. And it's up to us to look beyond what we can see on the surface and appreciate the full person. Emily Dawson didn't let the bikers or anyone else define her. She knew who she was, and she knew what she was capable of. She wasn't afraid to stand up for herself, even when others didn't believe in her. She wasn't afraid to let her strength shine through, even though it wasn't loud or flashy. She quietly stood her ground, and in doing so, she taught us all an important lesson. And it's not just about Emily. It's about you, too. Maybe you've been in a situation where you felt overlooked or misunderstood. Maybe you've been judged by your appearance or the way you act. But remember, you are more than what people see. You have strength inside you, just like Emily did. You have the power to surprise people, to show them that there's so much more to you than they might think. So, take a moment to reflect on your own life. When was the last time you judged someone without knowing their full story? When was the last time you assumed someone was weak or didn't have much to offer, only to realize you were wrong? We've all done it. It's human nature to make judgments based on what we see. But now, after hearing Emily's story, we can try to do better. We can choose to look beyond the surface and see the true strength in others. We can choose to be kinder, more understanding, and less quick to judge. Because the truth is, everyone has a story. Everyone has something powerful inside them. And if we take the time to see it, we can learn from each other. We can all grow stronger together. Let me know in the comments, when was the last time you judged someone without knowing their full story? Maybe you learned something that changed the way you look at others. Or maybe you realized you've been judged in ways that weren't fair. Whatever the case, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for sticking with Emily's story, and remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room holds the most power. And the people who judge by appearances? They're the ones who never see it coming.